as you point out, a really important one. You didn't vote for President Biden or for uncommitted in Minnesota's primary. The uncommitted vote was a big part of that primary in your home state. I wonder, if the election were held today, would you vote for Joe Biden? Can you confirm that he would have your vote today?
Of course, democracy is on the line. We are facing down fascism. And I personally know what my life felt like having Trump as the president of this country. And I know what it felt like for my constituents and for people around this country and around the world. We have to do everything that we can to make sure that does not happen to our country again.
And do you think your constituents ultimately will come to the same conclusion that you did, you know, the tens of thousands who voted uncommitted as a protest against the president?
Well, the uncommitteds have been very clear. They want a change in policy, and we've seen that. Within 3 days, you had the vice president using the word ceasefire. We now have the president saying there is a red line if Israel goes into Rafah, that he is going to condition aid. So there has been a significant progress. I think it is the responsibility of every citizen of this country that cares for the humanity of all to continue to push this administration to do what it can do to end the onslaught that Palestinians are living through every single day.
All right.
You know, when Joe Biden loses to the racist, insurrectionist, evil guy who can't read and is totally broke, or whatever they believe about Donald Trump, the dictator, the bloodbath, all that stuff, because he is going to lose. And when that happens, Democrats, they're going to completely implode into a political civil war. And when all that happens, it'll all be traceable back to October 7th. It will be traceable right back to that moment and the sort of kindred spirit that all the mushy-brained millennial Democrat voters have felt for Hamas terrorists ever since. And they'll tell you now that it's all about the loss of life in the fictional nation of Palestine. And I'll admit, if the figures that we're hearing are correct, that is a substantial loss of life, of innocent life. But on that topic, if the figures are correct, it would be literally the first time that that was the case in all the times that we've been down this very same road, right? But anyway, regardless of the figures, obviously war is bad. No one is discounting that. No one is denying that. And no one, except for Hamas, apparently, wanted this war. But this war is about self-defense, which really, if the left had any sort of intellectual integrity, which we all know they don't, but if they did, the efforts of Israel would be viewed no differently than Ukraine. But that will never, ever, ever happen. You know, the one thing that I think is almost guaranteed to happen as a result of all this is a real battle between whatever regular old school civil liberty type ACLU Democrats still exist, if any even do, between them and the progressive psychopaths that have literally taken over their party and looks like most of the base as well. And really, for what? For more power, for gaining power and keeping power for the already powerful, right? And it appears to me that the pro-Israel Democrats, if you can even use that term, if those people exist, they're starting to fold. But until that time, CNN is still operating in the land of common sense, and the real, true, dedicated leftists, they're coming for him over it.
Some of her colleagues, I'm not sure they would say that today.
No, she's a Democrat. They're going to vote for Biden. I'm not surprised about that. I am surprised that in the year of our Lord, 2024, there is a public relations agent for Hamas sitting in the United States Congress. The reason Israel is not at that meeting is because Hamas will not provide a list of the living hostages. I didn't hear a word of concern for the hostages. You know, ceasefire, she said, don't happen magically. Well, you know, there was a ceasefire in place on October the 6th. And who broke it on October the 7th? I cannot believe, honestly, what I heard out of that interview. What I want are for those hostages to come home. And I want somebody out there to show just a little bit of remorse that Hamas broke the ceasefire, raped and murdered horrifically women, all kinds of people. That's it. How about a little bit of concern for those folks? That's what I'm looking for.
And I just want to be clear, when I said a second ago about not pointing fingers, we all know that Hamas is the one that started this, and Hamas is the one that has to come to the table. The question is now, how do we get to a ceasefire? And that means that all the parties in the region are going to have to be present to make that happen.
Ilhan Omar there took this opportunity and your very important platform to say that Hamas was the good actor here. Hamas was ready for this meeting. And based on some conspiracy theory, our, Jake Sullivan, American representative, is maybe lying about what Israel wants to do and Israel's involvement. Look, I would not go to someone who is a supporter of the BDS movement for their advice on what Israel should do, or what the U.S. should do when it comes to Israel. She's trafficked in anti-Semitic tropes that seek to strip Israel and the Jewish people of their sovereignty, their identity. I don't trust her opinion on this issue at all. And listen, there are important voices for the Palestinian people. She's not one of them.
To Jamal's point, she did seem to acknowledge this isn't just Joe Biden waves a magic wand and suddenly there's a ceasefire. There's a lot of other stuff that needs to happen. The problem is that on the left, there are maybe millions of Democrats who believe that this is all 100% in Joe Biden's hands. And that's what he's dealing with politically.
Yeah, a couple things, not to continue the piling on of.
Let me know in the comments, man, if you got a problem with any of that, or if any of that actually seemed truly Islamophobic. I'm sorry, I don't think so. I'm getting real tired of all the racism deflection defense. I mean, it's fake and it's completely disingenuous. It just makes no sense. And it's getting really freaking old, man. But AOC watched that, I think, and instead of applying any kind of reason and her own limited ability to think, she just, of course, calls it racist. She says, how on earth is this blatant form of Islamophobia so casually accepted without pushback? It's shocking. It's not shocking. I mean, she's an idiot, man. What's shocking is the fact that that woman is in Congress. I mean, how many forms of Islamophobia are there? I mean, and if some evil straight white male had said the same words as Omar, would it still be racist to rebuke it and call it out? I mean, where exactly does the Islamophobia take over? I mean, I'm trying to make sense of it. I'm asking a real question. It just doesn't make sense. It's ridiculous, and it just doesn't help. It doesn't help anything. And another thing that doesn't help anyone, anywhere, that doesn't share his last name is Joe Biden.
She's right here.
Don't worry, Mr.
This is one of the big
Great speech. I was telling your secretary, I was in Jordan and Israel this weekend, and we just, we got to keep pushing what you're doing on the humanitarian stuff and all this stuff. So
I told him, baby, I'm gonna get this. I said, baby, you know I can't come to Jesus. Sure, just hot mic felt good. That was good.
So on top of hot mic moments and meddling in Israel's self-defense, pushing for a two-state solution that hasn't worked, and honestly, after everything that's happened over the past 5 months, 6 months, I can't imagine that it ever does work. But if it's ever got a chance in hell at succeeding, it's not for us to decide. I know what we were promised, and I know that liberals somehow still believe it. But that whole thing about Joe being the adult in the room and a foreign policy expert for 50 years of experience or whatever, Bibi Netanyahu, at least, he's not feeling it.
Well, I don't know exactly what the president meant. But if he meant by that I'm pursuing private policies against the majority, the wish of the majority of Israelis, and that this is hurting the interests of Israel, then he's wrong on both counts. Number one, these are not my private policies only. They're policies supported by the overwhelming majority of the Israelis. They support the action that we're taking to destroy the remaining terrorist battalions of Hamas. They say that once we destroy the Hamas, the last thing we should do is put in Gaza, in charge of Gaza, the Palestinian Authority that educates its children towards terrorism and pays for terrorism. And they also support my position that says that we should resoundingly reject the attempt to ram down our throats a Palestinian state. That is something that they agree on, and it's something that I think is also for the interests of Israel, because the majority of Israelis understand that if we don't do this, what we'll have is a repetition of the October 7th massacre, which is bad for Israel, bad for the Palestinians, bad for the future of peace in the Middle East. So the attempt to say that my policies are my private policies that are not supported by most Israelis is false. the vast majority, are united as never before, and they understand what's good for Israel.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. If you don't speak Netanyahu, he basically said, suck it. You know, more specifically, Joe Biden, suck it, was basically his exact words. He's going to do for his own country. And there is nothing any other world leader or the anti-Semitic forces that guide their principles can do about it. You know, basically, the world has been cheering on a defensive war in Eastern Europe for years now. You know, they set the precedent. Another thing they've been talking about for many, many years are the dangers of other nations meddling with elections and leaderships of other sovereign nations. I mean, it doesn't make sense. You can't make it up.
The fourth major obstacle to peace is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has all too frequently bowed to the demands of extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and the settlers in the West Bank. I have known Prime Minister Netanyahu for a very long time. While we have vehemently disagreed on many occasions, I will always respect his extraordinary bravery for Israel on the battlefield as a younger man. I believe in his heart he has his highest priority is the security of Israel. However, I also believe Prime Minister Netanyahu has lost his way by allowing his political survival to take the precedence over the best interests of Israel. He has put himself in coalition with far-right extremists like Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and as a result, he has been too willing to tolerate the civilian toll in Gaza, which is pushing support for Israel worldwide to historic lows. Israel cannot survive if it becomes a pariah. Prime Minister Netanyahu has also weakened Israel's political and moral fabric through his attempts to co-opt the judiciary, and he has shown zero interest in doing the courageous and visionary work required to pave the way for peace, even before this present conflict. As a lifelong supporter of Israel, it has become clear to me the Netanyahu coalition no longer fits the needs of Israel after October 7th. The world has changed radically since then, and the Israeli people are being stifled right now by a governing vision that is stuck in the past. Nobody expects Prime Minister Netanyahu to do the things that must be done to break the cycle of violence, to preserve Israel's credibility on the world stage, and to work towards a two-state solution. If he were to disavow Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and kick them out of his governing coalition, that would be a real meaningful step forward. But regrettably, there's no reason to believe Prime Minister Netanyahu would do that. He won't disavow Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir in their calls for Israelis to drive Palestinians out of Gaza and the West Bank. He won't commit to a military operation in Rafah that prioritizes protecting civilian life. He won't engage responsibly in discussions about a day-after plan for Gaza and a longer-term pathway to peace. Hamas and the Palestinians who support and tolerate their evil ways, radical right-wing Israelis in government and society, President Abbas, Prime Minister Netanyahu. These are the four obstacles to peace. And if we fail to overcome them, then Israel and the West Bank and Gaza will be trapped in the same violent state of affairs they've experienced for the last 75 years.
This dude makes me sick, man. This dude, Chuck Schumer, he really believes that he's a lifelong supporter of Israel. He just called himself a lifelong supporter of Israel. I mean, come on. It's got to be a joke. I mean, does he even believe that? I mean, does he not remember Barry actually funding a campaign against Netanyahu who knows how many years ago? Does Chucky think that he's got more pull than freaking Barry? I mean, what in the hell is the point of giving that worthless, toothless, foreign election meddling floor speech, except to placate and pacify the freakishly fast-growing number of wackos in his own party? I mean, can you imagine what we'd be saying if Israel was giving speeches talking about us needing to elect Donald Trump to stop shit like this from happening? they'd be losing their freaking minds. They'd be completely losing their minds. And I think it's probably safe to assume that no one in the world thinks that Chuck Schumer has any real power or speaks in any possible way for America. But just in case.
Good afternoon. We are here at the House Republican Issues Conference, and as we were in a work session here within the last half hour, there was a buzz among the audience as people were seeing notices come across their phone as something that was rather shocking to us. We saw the remarks from Senator Chuck Schumer calling for new elections in Israel. And we want to speak very clearly and concisely to say that this is not only highly inappropriate, it's just plain wrong for an American leader to play such a divisive role in Israeli politics while our closest ally in the region is in an existential battle for its very survival. We need to be standing with Israel, and we need to give our friends and allies our full support. We have to stand with and support them right now, but what you're seeing from the White House and clearly from the Senate Democrats is really exactly the opposite. They seem to be standing with and supporting Iran and its proxies instead. This is an extension of the Democrats' foreign policy that has projected weakness on the world stage and undermined our allies around the world. The most important election, in our view, is not what may happen in Israel, but the one that is needed right here in the United States. It will happen in November, and it cannot get here soon enough.
He's absolutely right, man. It is indicative of just more American weakness. And I think we're all seeing it's impossible to ignore it or deny it anymore. American weakness in the world, it really does cost lives. You know, our weakness in just the last few years has destroyed Afghanistan, cost American lives, destroyed Eastern Europe, and is now working its way all the way through the Middle East. And again, the election of Joe Biden has without a doubt cost hundreds of thousands of lives all around the world. And the speaker is right. November cannot come fast enough, man. We have got to put an end to this insanity, man, because it is insanity. You know, every single bit of it has happened because of bad politics and bad policy, man. The reason that powerful Democrats are slowly turning their back on Israel when they can actually see the finish line is because of only politics. You know, they're trying to protect themselves from their radical base, a radical base that they have fostered. I mean, they're the reason that these insane people even exist. And they're the reason that these people feel so emboldened and that they can do the insane things and make the insane demands that they do. And now, you know, they seem to have taken over most of Michigan. And Joey needs Michigan. So he's essentially, I think, willing to sacrifice Israel, our greatest ally in the Middle East and the only true liberal democracy for 2,000 freaking miles, to remain in power. And Michigan says that. What he's doing in Michigan says that. That's not going to cut it, bro.
We've had Vice President Harris calling in more forceful terms for a ceasefire. The president announced during the State of the Union that the military would be building a port in Gaza to deliver aid. He has been extremely critical of Netanyahu. He was caught on a hot mic. I'm sure you heard that. What have you thought of what have been significant rhetorical changes, at least? Has that gone anywhere?
Certainly, you know, pressure works. You see that there is a difference in tone where there's now a recognition of Palestinian suffering. But what I would tell you is that words are not enough. What we want to see is actual change in policy. We want to see actually holding Benjamin Netanyahu and the most right-wing government in Israel's history to account. You know, you heard Senator Schumer's remarks today on the floor demonstrating that pressure works.
That's the second time this progressive mayor has said that, demonstrating that pressure works. That's another mistake that the left has made with these people. You know, they have bent over backwards to placate and appease these crazy people. And the only message those people get is that Democrats are weak. And if we break enough shit or if we make enough ridiculous threats, we can get more. It's like negotiating with terrorists, man. They think they can get everything. And everything is always on a sliding scale. But I'll keep going, guys. But first, help the channel continue to grow. It's a very, very important year for us as conservatives, as Americans. So help the cause, man. Like, comment, subscribe, and share the channel.
demonstrating that pressure works, calling for the distancing and, in fact, the replacing of Benjamin Netanyahu as the prime minister, as well as calling upon President Biden and utilizing our ability and our tool to restrict military funding as a means of trying to find ourselves towards a just solution for the Palestinian people.
Well, you mentioned what Senator Schumer said, the Senate Majority Leader, calling for new elections in Israel. Would that make a difference to you? Do you think it would make a difference who leads Israel in the type of war that would be prosecuted? And how much of a difference does that make to you that he specifically is calling for that?
We have been sounding the alarm about Benjamin Netanyahu for over 2 decades, knowing that he is a fascist and a war tyrant and a war criminal. And he has been one of the individuals who gloats about being able to stall peace and prevent the establishment of a Palestinian state. So
just to be clear, man, the people who view Hamas as freedom fighters and refuse to believe that they use sexual violence as a weapon of terror while they were all hopped up on performance-enhancing drugs think that Netanyahu is a tyrant and a fascist and a criminal, a war criminal. It's amazing. I mean, sometimes you listen to people talk and you wonder if they really just cannot hear the words that they're saying. These people are so intellectually degraded by their own propaganda that nothing they say can be taken seriously, even by themselves. I mean, they're so untrustworthy that the girl at Starbucks should question even when they make an order.
Of a Palestinian state. So certainly it makes a difference with who leads the Israeli government. But what's important is that while the elections could be called for, elections can go into process, that doesn't change what's happening on the ground today. This is why it's extremely important for President Biden to utilize the leverage that he currently has and restricting military aid and being forceful in his calls not for a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent and lasting ceasefire immediately. Those are the things that we're looking for from our president, because that can make the difference today. Each morning we wake up and what we find is a kill count. How many innocent men, women, and children had been killed by the Israeli government, by the IDF, utilizing American manufactured weapons. And we need to halt that immediately.
And of course, we're watching starvation as well happen. And there's a lot of groups who are sounding the alarm about what should be coming here in the coming weeks. We've just started to see this, and it's expected to balloon if the aid doesn't increase dramatically.
One thing that this guy doesn't believe is that there are any Palestinians that aren't innocent. And I'm sure that he believes that everything that they've ever done is justified and everything that has happened or will happen is just a response to Israeli fascism or war crimes or whatever it is that they believe. They keep talking about a ceasefire like it's some sort of magical thing. But what do they think October 6th was? I mean, that was a ceasefire, and you can't even put a number on which ceasefire that was because they've had so many. But why do these people keep talking about a ceasefire? If they really do believe that there are mostly innocent people in Gaza, and they really do believe that a two-state solution is possible, and they also believe that ceasefires are magical, how is it possible that not one of these anti-Israel Democrats has ever opined on how to actually get rid of Hamas? Because, man, it's as simple as that. It really is that simple. If Hamas is gone, everybody lives happily ever after. But they don't frame it like this. They frame it as if, it's Israel versus Palestine. But it's not. It's not. And if they really do believe that there are innocent Palestinians, which I believe there are too, but if they believe it, which it doesn't seem they do, because if they did, then they should be willing to recognize that this is a battle between Israel and Hamas, not Israel and Palestine. And remarkably, this is the one and only thing that Joe Biden has actually understood and gotten anywhere near correctly in his entire career as a foreign policy expert and adult in the room. And it's amazing. It's his Mitch McConnell moment. Mitch was completely and totally worthless for many, many, many decades, but he single-handedly kept Merrick Garland from a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court. That's a bona fide world-saving hero move, for sure. This is Joe Biden's. And the even more remarkable thing, I think, is the Democrat base is so extreme and so screwy, man, so insane, that this one right thing Joey has ever done is going to be the thing that costs him his presidency. And that's about as poetic as it gets. I mean, we hear it from these leftists. The only thing that they will accept is a cutting off of military aid to Israel. And that's just not going to happen. That won't happen in a million years. And I'm not sure that he even has that power, but he won't do it. I know he at least won't do that. But anyway, interesting stuff, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you haven't already, Be a part of our growth, man. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.